Gaggle challenge, and if necessary, destroy the American already. It is now 9:14 p.m. And I need hardly mention that today is June 24th. 3 days have elapsed since summer solstice. Days are getting notoriously and noticeably shorter. It's already, you can tell that it's already getting dark. And it's all just downhill now. Depths, the dreary, dismal, intolerable uh, depths of cold and winter. However, on a positive note, thank you very much, everybody, who has joined me. Really appreciate it. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot going on, and chiefly, and I don't mean the NATO summit, that's some other occasion, but the sudden announcement of a ceasefire between Iran and Israel, and the acceptance by both Iran and Israel was obviously kind of surprising. Now, sometime yesterday, early evening, I guess night, it was kind of like lunchtime on the east coast of the United States, Iran unleashed its Mustelo Maserati says Tibor. Now, Tibor is not actually my name, it's the name of my father, and but also the name of my great uncle. I think it's Peter Kovacs is here. Yeah, so we had the retaliation, so to speak, by Iran against the United States. They hit a base in Qatar, and as was to be expected, it was little more than a symbolic strike, very reminiscent of what happened following the assassination of Soleimani in 2020. The United States pretty much made clear to Iran in 2020 and today that you've got one fish. You can take your best shot. Make sure you don't do any serious damage. Make sure you don't kill anyone, and you do that, and the other way retaliate in retaliation for retaliation. And that's what happened yesterday. However, what was a little surprising that in almost no time after this feeble retaliation by Iran, President Trump announced a ceasefire, a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. So let's take a first look at the developments yesterday. And here, this is it. So first of all, Trump sent out his familiar principle of truth, monumental damage done to all U.S. sites of Iran, as shown by Sabotaged. Obliteration is an accurate term. White structure shown is deeply embedded in the rock, with even its root welded around the rock and completely. The biggest damage took place far to ground level bullseye. So that was all. And obviously, we're going to have to see how extensive the damage really was. The lack of any radiation, no detection of any radiation levels in the vicinity, raised questions really about how effective this attack was, and in particular, the what happened to that enriched uranium, because it sounds very much, in one of the media reports suggesting it, that Iran had plenty of time to remove the enriched uranium, knowing that the attack was coming, and where it is now. Now, obviously, the laboratories have been destroyed, the centrifuges destroyed. Whether they can be reconstituted, that's a different question. I don't see why they couldn't. But in any case, it does suggest that the Iranians had plenty of time to remove the enriched uranium, and no attempt was made during the time that they removed the enriched uranium. No attempt was made to prevent this. Trucks parked outside the border with the facility, trucks parked going, and assumed that they were there in order to also significant that while in 2020 the United States assassinated Soleimani, so that led to a dead Iranian, and a very significant Iranian. This time around, the United States attacks, Israel, the United States attacks did not result, as far as we can tell, they did not result in any deaths of Iranians. There's plenty of signaling that this attack is coming, and one has to assume that the Iranians have removed humans from the vicinity, and so therefore, Iran's retaliatory attack didn't kill any Americans. It was selective, since the Americans didn't kill any Iranians, Iranians in America. Anyway, this was from the truth. And then this was a little different. I want to come to that, where he talked about Medvedev. We talked about Russia. But then he again went back to this issue of how much damage the United States inflicted on those sites. The sites that we hear Iran totally destroyed, and everyone knows it. Only the fake news that say different things try to mean as much as possible. And even they say they were pretty well working especially hard on this also is Alison Cooper of Fake News CNN, who means Anderson Cooper of Fake CNN. Probably won't, because of the derogatory girl's name. Alison Cooper of Fake News CNN, done by Robert, chairman of Comcast, and Johnny Hall of ABC Fake News, and always losers of the game Comcast in these fake news that never enter the sleaze bags of the media, and that's why they're reaching the all-time low terrible credibility. So the Iranians are still very insistent upon this huge irreparable damage to the United States. And then Trump finally gets around to addressing the Iranian attack on the U.S. military base in Qatar. And it says Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. It's a very weak response. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was headed in the direction. I'm pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. So here is being sarcastic about Iran's retaliation. And then he puts in a condescending sentence. He says, most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and they will hopefully be no further hit. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice. It's genuine. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for the lives of us. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I would enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. That gets already very significant when he said this out. This was quite a startling change of tone, because remember, the day before, he had been talking about regime change in Iran. And in previous days, he had talked about unconditional surrender. So here's the book. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I would enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. So not only is he not pursuing regime change in Iran, he's saying that I'm going to tell Israel to knock it off and not going to encourage regime change. Thank you. Israel to Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony, and I will enthusiastically encourage. This was already causing panic among the Israel forces, who have been very influential in recent weeks, such as Bannon. So here, then Trump goes on and says, I'd like to thank the highly respected Emir of Qatar for all he has done in seeking peace in the region. Regarding the attack today at the American base in Qatar, I'm pleased to report that in addition to no American killed or wounded, very importantly, there was simply no fatalities. Again, thank you for your attention. And then he sent out this strange troops. Congratulations, well, it's time for peace. So, like you said, oh, they thought this retaliation out of the system. Now it's time for peace. And then he said, congratulations, everyone has been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now when Israel and Iran have wound down and progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start a ceasefire, and upon the 12th, after 12 hours, Israel is going to ceasefire, and upon the 24th, an official end to the 12-day war. He's already coined the phrase and described what's been happening as a 12-day war will be saluted by the world during the ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful. Only assumption that everything works as it should will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the three-day war. So no mention here of America's role, his role in particular in instigating this war, in planning, conspiring with Israel to attack unprovoked Iran, um, and then of course the completely unprovoked attack by the United States itself on Iran, something that never happened. It doesn't make any mention of that, something that this was the United States apparently a neutral observer, a disinterested mediator, having the stamina, courage, intelligence, and what should be called this is the war that could have gone on for years. Again, as if the United States had played no years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't, and never will. God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. Side of the state. Um, so, I mean, what was already striking about this was the basically it's telling Israel previously why that is so is that the goal up until then had been regime change. That there should be a removal of the mullahs from power in Tehran. So now, Trump apparently saying, well, that's not a goal, and Israel should not be pursuing this goal, and indeed the US saying, God bless Iran. It's Israel first, but nonetheless, these things so that was quite startling. And Iran, Iran and Israel now, right away, the conclusion that you have to draw from Trump's announcement is that he is limiting the U.S. Agenda to the nuclear area. So after all the talk about regime change, he's clearly removing the U.S. from that project and has specifically focused on ending Iran's nuclear program. But leave that aside. Weapons. Iran didn't have nuclear weapons. Iran was doing what it was entitled to do under the non-proliferation treaty. It was entitled to enrich uranium to whatever level Iran deemed appropriate. That's regarding keeping with so that's what he's doing that. But I think leave that aside. The the goal that Trump seemed to be pursuing days before with this regime change is now abandoned. And the Mahmoudans have already expressed their disgust because hey, you've been saying that on his podcast, but he nonetheless is Trump. So, as the evening wore on, Trump began to grow exasperated with Israel because apparently, to Trump's astonishment, Israel constantly without more troops, Israel and Iran came to me almost simultaneously and said, peace. I knew the time was now. The world and the Middle East will need both nations to see tremendous love, peace, and prosperity in their futures. They have so much to gain, and yet so much to lose if they stray from righteousness and truth. The future for Israel and Iran is limited, and I promise God bless you both. Again, the tone is so markedly different from his tone. Remember on Saturday night when he announced the U.S. attacks, because up until Saturday, he talked positively, he looked relations with Iran, he just having everybody in principle, not the Iranian people, good relations, the sky's the limit, conflict. And then on Saturday night, he went back into the mindless hateful neo-propaganda Iran, and he goes Americans, the Iranians kill, and terrorism, don't fund terrorist all this nonsense. And now suddenly Trump is going back to his pre-Saturday frame of mind, and then he says, we couldn't have made today's deal without the talent, the courage, and the greatness of pilots, and all the decisions right? And then proudly announced the ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it. And then he sounds this out. Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do it, it's a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. So this was a very significant truth that he sent out. Israel will not drop those bombs. If you do it, it's a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. Because what had happened was that Israel was doing what Israel always does, trying to sabotage any possible deal, such a deal as a ceasefire. Israel is do is put a conflict and Israel no interest in doing anything other than putting attack Iran. Here, it says in the South, don't do it. This one, so apparently the United States can say no when it wants to. And since Trump had invested his reputation in this ceasefire, this thing pissed him off. And so as we learned today, um, this was the Trump and Netanyahu had a very poor evening. And so there was some interesting articles, largely in the Israeli press and in Axios press. This really so these things were very connected. And here was the story in Axios. It says Iran launches missiles at Israel as Trump's ceasefire concepts. And then behind the scenes, Trump's effort to end the war began in earnest on Saturday. It was already on Saturday, so November 10 p.m. when he made that announcement, his three mummies standing behind him. Shortly after, U.S. people bombers launched 14 massive cluster bombs that almost completely destroyed civilians. President instructed them of their revenge by striking US targets. Now, so Iran says, yeah, but we need at least one free punch. But prior to launching its missile attack on the Al-Udeid airbase in Qatar, Iran sent messages to the company prior to conveying and targets being identified. So that we'll have one free punch, but we'll tell you all about it. We'll give you all the details, what time it'll take place, where we're going to hit, and give you plenty of time. Immediately after the strike, the Iranians sent another back-channel message notifying the White House that they would not continue any further military The White House responded again via the Congress, saying the U.S. would not retaliate to the Iranian attack and reiterated the White House reiterated its readiness to resume Monday evening, when it came in Iranian time, Trump called the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told him he wanted to end, and Netanyahu agreed to the ceasefire and said Israel will not conduct any more strikes as long as the fire doesn't stop on this course. And then Trump spoke to and then when it was all agreed, Trump announced the ceasefire and then so the New York Times also said, can you that's going to be a very interesting question because, of course, the U.S. stands or falls with Trump's claim that they have destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities against citation of nuclear weapons, American fiction. The issue with the nuclear facilities are they permanently destroyed? It seems to be very critical whatever happened to that enriched uranium. And if they have the enriched uranium in the centrifuge, I would that to reconstitute the centrifuge. And even if the sites and the plans were destroyed, destroyed, that would be possible to reconstitute them if that's what Iran wants to do, and that's not a good point. Because it's possible Iran wants to normalize the relationship with the United States. We don't yet know, but it's quite possible. But the goal all along on Iran's part has been to normalize the relationship with the United States. And the Americans, some neo-Israel first, Zionists have this attack on Iran. Now, Israel, of course, say that they have a very different view. Trump is obviously now saying, I am done, we've achieved what we wanted to achieve, I don't need to do anything more. Clearly, you would agree with this, that Israel is going to continue to hit Iran. I mean, it's just, that's what Israel is. Anyway, Iran's response to attacks on the nuclear facilities gives global Americans a defiation as they keep narrative. But now it's all ceasefire is fragile, and Iran wants to hit an American target in the region, but it was also treated as more attacks on the United States, so Iran's revolutionary guard chose the Al-Udeid airbase in Qatar for two reasons. It's the largest American military installation, and they believe the base has been coordinating American military strikes. But because it's in Qatar, a close ally, the Iranian also damage in many several articles striking around South sending bombs imminent crossing the message. Not opposing that space and the Iranian state government resolved this lightning in the skies and its Gaggle exposed Iran country and the picture of war with imperial behind the scenes. Iran's leaders were hoping that limited flag Iran's warning down about the same. One of the Iranian officials said that the plan was for no Americans to withdraw, given that any deaths might spur the United States to retaliate. Then, of course, we have the issue of Trump's displeasure with Netanyahu. Trump now clearly start this ceasefire that is touting, and Netanyahu is opposed to the ceasefire, and that's evil. So here's a story from Arrest. Stunned by Trump verbally blaming Oman inside Jerusalem side of the troops. Israel is overwhelmed by Trump's contact demand accusations of Trump's violation. Netanyahu's cabinet backing the ceasefire. Israel will now meet aside and here no form of agreement behind the ceasefire terms Israel and Iran. Instead, both sides are problems panics while the United States declared nuclear and then US President Donald Trump sharp up the demand of Israel and Ukraine from retaliating against Iran's ceasefire violation. Following a statement, Iranian Air Force ordered to return from Iranian airspace. So that was that proof that he said no. But he said, don't do it, don't run. Following the statement, Iranian Air Force ordered to return from Iranian airspace. And the planned strike was scheduled that after Trump's warning was corrected in Netanyahu, Israel's leadership then decided to align with the US and respond symbolically, targeting radar installations near Tehran while avoiding how Israel flagged it about so, and then Trump, on his way today to the NATO summit in The Hague, really was in a crowd movement. It was early in the morning. He probably only had 2 hours of sleep. But he really unleashed on everybody. He spoke about Israel in a way that is quite unusual for any American president, and especially Trump. Let's see what he said as he was getting
But reports coming from the region suggest that the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it. Okay? I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those B-2 pilots did an unbelievable job.
American goal now was now saying, okay, well, we hit those sites, and three nuclear sites, and, and that's great. And this return to his pre-Saturday night call, they say, well, it's people are very happy to work with them. The sky's the limit of all that they can accomplish. The only issue is they can't nuclear weapons. Because they need people that Iran never intended to have a nuclear weapon. Um, but in Trump's mind, and obviously in Trump's mind, because that was the idea put to him by Israel, and the Israel first. People can hear this. Is it audio now? Um, is, is the audio now good? Because I know initially I had to notice that commenting on the audio. Tell me it's like 4% better now. I can all right. So I'm gonna maybe go out and then I'm gonna come back.
Okay. Is this is the audio now? Is the audio now better? Can you hear me now? This audio is has is the audio good now? Can you hear me now? Um, better. Somebody Dale Owen says better, but it's not still not great. Um, but you can hear me. Okay, you can hear me. All right. So all right. After this, yeah, that's my apologies for not realizing that there was a real audio issue. So then, just to recapitulate, we have Trump announcing a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. Now, this is a little bit much because the way he's presenting the issues is as if the United States is a disinterested observer, a disinterested mediator that rather than an active accomplice in Israel's war. Remember, Iran had been subjected to an unprovoked attack. Rick Turpin says it's perfect now. Oh, thank you. Well, but yeah, thank you. So Iran had been subjected to this, but Trump is nonetheless saying, "Well, okay, we the Americans, we achieved what we wanted to achieve. What our goal was, that was to end Iran's nuclear weapons program. And again, Iran didn't have a nuclear weapons program. Iran had a nuclear enrichment program, which it is entitled to have under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But Trump, under the influence, obviously, of Netanyahu, Mark Levin, and the rest, uh, considered a nuclear enrichment program to be the same as a nuclear weapons program. So that's why his demands changed quite dramatically during his negotiations with Iran to go from hey, no nuclear weapons to no nuclear enrichment, which of course was guaranteed to ensure that the talks would fail, which is of course what Israel wanted. Israel wanted all along for the talks to fail. And once the talk failed, then it would be time to bomb Iran. Um, but as after Saturday night, when Trump unleashed this vituperative statement about Iran, bringing up all manner of things from 40 years ago, claiming that Iran was behind the deaths of I don't know how many Americans, and that Iran is the greatest sponsor of terrorism in the world, and all the usual nonsense. And then when his flunkies, his flunkies, Vice President Vance, Defense Secretary Hegseth, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, his flunkies all said, no, we're not in the regime change business. All we're interested in, all the only thing President Trump is interested in is to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. That's all. That's all. We're not interested. And then Trump, having watched this on television, got sick of this and declared, "Yeah, why not regime change?" Yeah. So by Sunday evening, it seemed as if Trump had now embraced the most extreme Israel first position. The Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, Smotrich, Mark Levin, all of them who have been baying for a change in regime in Tehran for decades. But now, after this this attack, and let me see if I want to, since this was the audio had been very poor then. So let me see if I can just go back a little bit here. Just the so after the attack from Qatar, for Iran's the Iran's attack on all right, let me just okay. Yep. So then he sent out this truth. So I talked about this, when during the audio crash, and he had said Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities with a very weak response, which we expected and have very effectively countered. There have been 14 missiles fired, 13 were knocked down, one was set free because it was headed in a non-threatening direction. I'm pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and there will hopefully be no further hate. I want to thank Iran for giving us early notice, which made it possible for no lives to be lost. and nobody to be injured. Perhaps Iran can now proceed to peace and harmony in the region, and I will enthusiastically encourage Israel to do the same. So here, he was clearly distancing himself completely from the regime change project. He's saying, well, okay, they go, peace and harmony. Yeah, I'm for peace and harmony, and I'm going to tell Israel also to pursue peace and harmony. The very last thing that Netanyahu and Mark Levin and the rest wanted to hear. And so this clearly was, they're saying, okay, we're now drawing a line in the sand, and that's it. This is, the rest of it is just ancient history, and so he then just go back to that. He sent out another truth, making clear that congratulations, world, it's time for peace. And then again, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their progress, blah, blah, blah. And then it says, we'll call it the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel. God bless Iran. God bless the Middle East. God bless the United States of America. God bless the world. So, as I said, this is a very different in tone from any notion that he has any interest in regime change. And then and then he went on when he said, ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it. And then he really unleashed on Israel. Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do it, is a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. And then he said, Israel is not. So then he talked to Netanyahu and told him in a tone that is obviously one that Netanyahu understood, and he did indeed call it off. As we'll see when we look at those stories, the Israeli press said, yeah, he called it off. So the Israel does call things off when the United States really insists on it. So so much for all those stories that Netanyahu was determined to bomb Iran and the United States was unable to stop it. The United States is unable to stop it. Clearly, the United States is very much able to stop Israel when it wants to. And then there's more details about that. It says from Barak Ravid, it says, senior Israel official, Trump called Netanyahu on Tuesday. That was when he sent out, when he told Israel, don't do it, don't bomb. Trump called Netanyahu on Tuesday and asked him not to carry out an attack in Iran at all. Netanyahu told Trump that he could not cancel the strike and that some response was needed to Iran's violation of the ceasefire. It's not at all clear that Trump was persuaded that Iran had indeed violated the ceasefire. In the end, it was decided to significantly scale back the strike, cancel the attack on a large number of targets, and strike only one target. And then Barak Ravid goes on. He's this well-connected. He's a former Israeli army officer. It says a White House source told me that Trump spoke to Netanyahu in, quote, an exceptionally firm and direct way about his objections to the Israeli strike in Iran. The president told Netanyahu what needed to happen to sustain the ceasefire. The prime minister understood the severity of the situation, and the concerns President Trump expressed, and then Mark Caputo, also from Axios, repeated the same story. It sounds as if Trump ripped Bibi via phone. President Trump was exceptionally firm and direct with Prime Minister Netanyahu about what needed to happen to sustain the ceasefire. The Prime Minister understood the severity of the situation and the concerns President Trump expressed. And then to add insult to injury, Trump today said, we're not going to do regime change in Iran. So after all the ranting and raving from Levin, and Mark Levin had been ranting and raving now for more than a day, basically, hey, this is a ceasefire with Hitler. This is Hitler and the Nazis. You can't have a ceasefire with Nazis. So here's the Hill. Trump backs away from leadership turnover in Iran. Regime change takes chaos. President Trump on Tuesday backed away from talk of a regime change in Iran amid pushback from MAGA supporters about the possibility of a deeper U.S. involvement in the Middle East. The president was asked if he wants an Iranian regime change, and he replied no. He added that he wants to see everything calm down as quickly as possible. Regime change takes chaos, and ideally, we don't want to see so much chaos, so we'll see how it goes, he told reporters as on his way to the Hague. Then he goes on, the Iranians are very good traders, very good business people. They got a lot of oil. They should be fine. They should be able to rebuild and do a good job. They're never going to have nuclear, but other than that, they should do a great job, which is exactly what I've been saying for years. And then before leaving the White House, the president railed against Israel and Iran for continuing to fight overnight after the president announced the parameters of a ceasefire the day before. And so this is what I was wanted to show, what Trump said on his way to this ridiculous NATO summit at The Hague. So he was in a foul mood because Netanyahu, he had told Netanyahu to knock it off. Netanyahu had not knocked it off, and had, this whole thing had been cooked up. This project of attacking Iran had been cooked up by Netanyahu, and now Netanyahu wanted to continue. And that's here we are. So he's on his way to Air Force One, and let's listen to this.
From the region suggest that the sides accuse each other for violating the ceasefire. So
I think they both violated it. I don't think I'm not sure they did it intentionally. They couldn't rein people back. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. So as soon as I get away from you, I'm going to see if I can stop it. Okay? I think it's been completely demolished. I think the reason we're here is because those pilots, those B-2 pilots, did an unbelievable job. And the fake news, like CNN in particular, they're trying to say, well, I agree that it was destroyed, but maybe not that destroyed. You know what they're doing? They're really hurting great pilots that put their lives in the line. CNN is scum, and so is MSDNC. They're all, and frankly, the networks aren't much better. It's all fake news, but they should not have done that. Those pilots hit their targets. Those targets were obliterated, and the pilots should be given credit. They're not after the pilots, they're after me. They want to try and demean. Iran will never rebuild its nuclear. From there? Absolutely not. That place is under rock. That place is demolished. The B-2 pilots did their job. They did it better than anybody could even imagine. They hit late in the evening. It was dark with no moon, and they hit that target with every one of those things, and that place is gone. But when I see CNN all night long, they're trying to say, well, maybe it wasn't really as demolished as we thought. It was demolished. And you take a look at the pinpricks, and you see that place is gone. And I will say, I think CNN ought to apologize to the pilots of the B-2s. I think that MSDNC ought to apologize. I think these guys really, these networks or these cable networks are real losers. You really are. You're real losers. You're gutless losers. I say that to CNN because I watch it. I have no choice. I got to watch this garbage. It's all garbage. It's all fake news. But I think CNN is a gutless group of people. And the people that run it, nobody even knows it's been sold so many times. But the people that run it ought to be ashamed. MSDNC, a guy named Brian Roberts, he heads it. He's a disgrace. He's a weak, pathetic disgrace. Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that.
So you listen to this. This is a remarkable tirade against Israel. He's basically calling into question Israel's claims that Iran had violated the ceasefire. Because what Israel was doing is what Israel always does. Israel always violates every ceasefire. That's its calling card. It always violates every ceasefire. And of course, Israel just did, but it always does. What Israel didn't realize was that now Trump was heavily invested in this ceasefire. This is his big thing. Well, I've got this arranged this ceasefire, and I'm going to go to the NATO summit as the hero of the hour. Of course, he's not any kind of a hero of the hour, but he saw himself as a hero of the hour, as somehow he's the peacemaker. And to be honest, of course, his worst sycophants, all those Charlie Kirks and the rest of them were saying, "Oh, he's a peacemaker. Fantastic. He's got peace. He's made peace. He's launched this war." But Netanyahu did what he always does, and then he said, "Well, I'm not happy. You unload all these bombs when I told you we got a ceasefire." So he clearly, he's in a really foul mood, and a foul mood against Israel. The way he talks about Israel here, no president has ever done. And when we have to be realistic and say, well, one that doesn't mean all that much. He's just today in a foul mood, and then he might say something very different tomorrow. But what's clear from this is that when the United States wants, it can rein Israel in. And that was the point, that hey, when we tell you this is a ceasefire and that you have to adhere to this ceasefire, and when you say it in a sufficiently threatening way, then lo and behold, Israel capitulates. Anyway, let's continue with that.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Did everyone catch that? They don't know what the F they're doing. They've been fighting for so long, they don't know what the F they're doing. There it was. He said it. It's on live TV, a family show. Children are watching, and there he is using this language. But what was interesting here is that it is this rebuke, and if we read the see if we can, was that the story in the Times of Israel. Here's this. And what actually happened. So remember, he announces a ceasefire. Netanyahu goes off to do his bombing thing. And here's the Times of Israel, which is reporting this, this conversation that took place between Trump and Netanyahu. Israel reportedly planned to strike 15 key regime targets when Trump told Netanyahu not to respond to Iran missiles this morning. So Trump announces a ceasefire. Let me see. Hold on, I have to. Sorry, I have to address this. Okay. Yes. So it responded Iran missile this morning, and then it goes on. Israel was reportedly planning to strike 15 important regime target. Let me just. Okay. Israel was reportedly planning to strike 15 important regime targets in response to Iran's violation of the fresh ceasefire with missile fire at the north this morning, before President Donald Trump told Prime Minister Netanyahu not to carry out the attack. According to, 15, there's a ceasefire, and Israel is planning to strike 15 important regime targets. According to Channel 12 News, Trump told him to prevent the entire attack when they spoke by phone. Netanyahu ordered the planes held over the skies in Iran, and the Israeli political echelon sought one site that could be targeted with no collateral damage. Okay, let me see. Yeah, Netanyahu ordered the planes held over the skies, and the Israeli political sought one side that could be targeted with no collateral damage. Ultimately, a single radar target was struck, and then Trump made clear. And then Channel 12 also notes that in a podcast today, that's today, Tuesday, Trump's former key advisor, Steve Bannon, said that Trump's public denunciation of Netanyahu, in which Trump said that Iran and Israel don't know what the F they're doing, showed Trump as angry as he had ever seen. All right. So, okay, good. All right. So that was the thing, and you can see that here, Trump had made clear, hey, this is my ceasefire, and Netanyahu was obviously thinking, well, I mean, what do I care about a ceasefire? I've never cared about ceasefires in my life. But now Trump is making clear, and then that, hey, when I say there's a ceasefire, you got to adhere to what I say. And that is that there has to be a ceasefire. And and so now the Israelis are on board for the time being, because let's keep in mind, Israel isn't going to just let this go. While Trump has said now in public, no, I'm not interested in regime change because that brings chaos. And besides, I kind of like the Iranians. They're good businessmen. They're good traders. I don't want to do anything harmful to them. This is not the talk that is exactly music to the ears of Mark Levin. He's just saying, yeah, I want to work with the Iranians, and now he's accepted that all of Iran's nuclear facilities have been destroyed. Now, that's going to be a very interesting question because, of course, as he was speaking, there were already questions about how much was really destroyed. And you could see here he is angry because the media are expressing some skepticism about the extent of the destruction of Iran's nuclear program. So he keeps repeating, no, it's absolutely gone, completely destroyed, demolished, whatever. That's why I don't have to do any regime change. And Netanyahu, who basically was never interested in the whole issue of nuclear weapons and all this nonsense, Israel and the Israel Firsters, their goal, of course, has been and will continue to be regime change. So here, this is a report that appeared on CNN really just before we went on air. And this is let me just go back here. Yeah, so this was, as I say, this appeared on CNN and exclusive. Early U.S. intel assessments suggest strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites, sources say. I'm skeptical of the story when I look at the byline. Natasha Bertrand, CIA mouthpiece, Zachary Cohen, likewise. I don't know who Katie Bo-Lillis is. So they have an interest in suggesting, oh no, this Iran's nuclear program, well, that's still up and running. It was a minimal amount of damage. So early U.S. intel suggests strikes on Iran did not destroy nuclear sites. The U.S. military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months. Remember that? Likely only set it back by months. Now, when you read this is the exactly what Israel wants to put out. No, minimal damage, and then Israel's allies in the United States, which is the CIA, particularly under the CIA director, John Ratcliffe, who do not want this U.S. war against Iran to end. So now already things are beginning to take a very distinct form. So Trump, who clearly last night and today has been suggesting it's over. I'm putting a line under it that said we accomplished what we intended to do. I only had a very limited goal, which was to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. I have no interest in regime change. I actually quite like the Iranians. We can do business with them. And then then we have all the fulmination from Mark Levin. You can't do business with Hitler and the rest. And now, lo and behold, we have this early intelligence assessment that says, no way, you haven't succeeded in doing anything much more than set back the nuclear program by a few months. The assessment, which has not been previously reported. So they, of course, CIA has its mouthpiece, CNN. Naturally, they put this stuff to give this story to CNN. The assessment, which has not been previously reported, was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence arm. It is based on a battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. Central Command in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes. So so this is the story that CNN is already putting out. And the analysis of the damage to the sites and the impact of the strikes on Iran's nuclear ambitions is ongoing and could change as more intelligence becomes available. But the early findings are at odds with President Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also said on Sunday that Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. Two of the people familiar with the assessment said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium was not destroyed. One of the people said the centrifuges were largely intact. And then, so the DIA, this Defense Intelligence Agency assessment, is that the U.S. set them back maybe a few months tops. The White House acknowledged the existence of this assessment, but said they disagreed with it. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told CNN in the statement, this alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret, but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 30,000 pound bombs perfectly on their targets, total obliteration. And then the US military said the operation went as planned and it was an overwhelming success. It's still early for the US to have a comprehensive picture of the impact of the strikes, and none of the sources described how the DIA assessment compares to the view of other agencies in the intelligence community. So you can see here how a story is shaping up. There was no way that Trump could come along and say, "Hey, now we've got a peace. It's over. The war between." Sorry for the noise. The usual ubiquitous police sound. But here, there's no way that the Israel firsters, the Israel lobby, was simply going to let this go and accept and say, okay, well, the war against Iran is over. They've come a long way to persuading President Trump to launch this attack on Iran, and now for Trump to announce, "Oh, we've got a ceasefire, and so therefore we don't need to do anything more," and that I'm ruling out regime change. Clearly, it was entirely to be expected that within hours, the media would report that only a minimal amount of damage had been done to Iran's nuclear program. Hard to see how you can assess it one way or the other, whether the damage is fatal or the damage is superficial. I would find it surprising that they can work on it within a few months. But I think the most important part of it is that they want to suggest at this stage that, hey, Iran isn't just going to go away as long as you keep this regime in Tehran. They're going to continue with their nuclear ambitions, and so the war against Iran needs to continue, and that's clearly the thrust of this intelligence assessment that came came so early. Minimal amount of damage. We have to come back and hit Iran again. Anyway, let's go to our locals page and to the Gagglers who have been the here we are. This is the people who contribute to our community, and above all, they contribute to making sure that the dogs are fed and watered and are kept happy. So Dale Owens, always good to see you, Dale. Haven't seen you in a while, but nice to see you back. Marty, always good to see you. Thank you so much for your generosity. Tuesday. Good evening, George and Gaggler. Summer Petrus, good to see you. And says, well, sound is good. Well, that was that was good. And then here we have DJ David, and says, I heard that Netanyahu keeps a Trump sock puppet next to his phone to entertain himself during his calls with Trump. Probably. But we know how the Israel lobby operates, and they never let anything go. I mean, they're not just going to abandon regime change. Remember, what Israel has been doing for years, as a way of changing the subject. It's basically it always wants to change the subject. I mean, the subject, which is the state of the Palestinians. They change the subject and start talking about these terrible adversaries who, if only they can be removed, if only they can be made to disappear, then there will be peace and harmony in the Middle East. So, everyone who has been around for years will remember, this procession of bugaboos for Israel. Starting from Nasser in the 1950s, and then we had Yasser Arafat, we had Saddam Hussein, we had Hafiz Assad, we had Hamas, we have the Iranians. There's always somebody. If only we can get rid of this entity, then somehow there'll be peace and harmony in the Middle East. And Israel has done this, and so now they are really preoccupied with this. Sorry, it's just this. I'm having this difficulty with this stand here on the computer, so you can see me constantly. This. Let's see. Is this going to be any better? So that's why they're not going to just let this go. Just like they spent the 1990s going after Saddam Hussein, even though Saddam Hussein had been completely diminished after his defeat in the Gulf War and the imposition of sanctions. Nonetheless, Israel and its agents, they continue this drumbeat in Washington that somehow Saddam Hussein needed to be taken out. That somehow there could never be any peace in the Middle East as long as Saddam Hussein survived. And exactly the same thing will go into effect with Iran. So, we can see this in the talk of Mark Levin, and so that's they're talking now. Hey, this is Nazis. These are Nazis. This is Hitler. These are Hitler and Tehran. You can't just allow them to survive. So that's why I think it's given Trump's sudden reversal, at least over the past 24 hours, his reversal on the issue of regime change, and in particular, he's now touting this ceasefire that the Israel lobby will go into operation. Now, Trump, as we all know, is a mercurial person, and he can change his mind. He obviously changed his mind very drastically on the issue of Iran and its nuclear program, because remember, during the negotiations that have been taking place in Oman with Steve Witkoff, it seemed as if Trump had settled on Iran having the capacity to enrich uranium. He said that he wouldn't necessarily have a problem with that, but they're going to put in some additional safeguards, and they'll put in it'll all be done under IAEA auspices. But in principle, Iran should be able to possess the right to enrich, just not to create nuclear weapons. And so everything seemed to be heading towards some kind of a reasonable settlement, and something that he can then say, yeah, this is the JCPOA agreement, but it's so much tougher. There's so many additional safeguards there which Obama hadn't negotiated. And then suddenly Trump changed his position and declared that there could be no enrichment, which was obviously coming from Israel. No enrichment at all. And that's why the talks basically were going nowhere. So it was Trump who had changed his position, and so that's why he, under the influence of the Israel lobby had sabotaged the negotiations he was engaged in. So that was the preliminary to the 13th of June attacks from Israel, and then which the United States then joined. So now Trump has again reversed himself. No, I mean, he at least he's saying that what we've done is we've eliminated the nuclear program, and now there's nothing standing in the way of an improvement of normalizations of relations with Iran. Now, as I say, that story in CNN, and I think there are going to be more of these kinds of stories appearing, telling us that no, Iran has more or less retained its nuclear facilities. It can reconstitute its centrifuges. It still has that enriched uranium that hasn't been accounted for, because they had, I don't know how many kilos of that enriched uranium that's still around, and so you can't let it go. So just in the same way that in March 1991, after Saddam Hussein's defeat and humiliation, after all of the UN Security Council resolutions against him, and after all the sanctions that were imposed on him, and after all the UN weapons inspectors, everything, none of that made any difference. The drumbeat continued. We have to get rid of Saddam Hussein. So this is the same thing will take place when it comes to Iran. The one other aspect of it that I think is quite interesting, and well, all right. There was an interesting story that appeared today. I want to talk about this. It was a story that appeared today in the Washington Post about Israel's attack, which on June the 13th, which everyone hails as being this extraordinarily effective and powerful and so on. Now, I mean, I think when we had on Marandi, I think he rightly pointed out that there's nothing, there really is nothing special in what Israel did, because really, if you set out to assassinate a number of leaders, generals and whatever, it's not that, in principle, it's not really that difficult to accomplish, because well, you have the generals live at home. It's not that hard to find out their home addresses. I mean, I don't know how to do it, but I'm quite sure that intelligence services, probably even a halfway competent private investigator, can probably find out the home addresses of, let's say, America's top general staff. I don't think. I mean, the home address of Pete Hegseth. I mean, probably wouldn't be that difficult to do. So what Israel did when it launched its attack, its decapitation strike, it wasn't really anything spectacular. They knew the home addresses of Iran's nuclear scientists. They knew the home addresses of its generals, and they hit them with missiles. Now, of course, as is Israel's wont, they care nothing about collateral damage. They care nothing about the civilians they hit. They just, we'll kill this general. I mean, he's sleeping at home. He's got his wives and children and whatever. We don't care. Kill children? We don't care about that. But there was an interesting article in the Washington Post today. So that not only did Israel launch this attack on this decapitation strike, which, as I say, everyone is really thinks it's so fantastic. No, I mean, it wouldn't be difficult to do that to American generals, American scientists. Just wouldn't be that difficult to do, and no one would think, "Hey, this is a really neat exercise." I mean, after all, you could argue that the 9/11 terrorist attacks were really brilliantly executed. Hey, they took down the two World Trade Center towers and they hit the Pentagon. That's what an amazingly deft, brilliant operation. Nobody ever said that. Yeah, but everyone with this whole obsession and there's this about Israel. Somehow Israel is so brilliant and organizes things. So there's all these decapitation strikes were just amazing in their effectiveness. But as it turned in the story from the Washington Post, not only did Israel attack generals, but which incidentally haven't really been particularly effective. I mean, Iran has still been able to continue its fight against Israel. So even if you take out one general, he can be replaced by another general, and you can take out his replacement, and then the third one will still be able to continue. I mean, you're not going to destroy any military structure by just killing off the generals. There's always going to be somebody who can step in. But anyway, what it said here is that they killed the generals, and then they started threatening those generals that they didn't kill. So here's this. Let's take a look at this Washington Post story. And here it is. Right. So here it is. It says, Israeli warning call to top Iranian general. You have 12 hours to escape. So they launched this decapitation strike. You have and then they telephone. Because again, they found out the telephone number of Iranian generals. You have 12 hours to escape. So it says that an audio recording obtained by the Washington Post is a window into the covert campaign by Israeli intelligence to intimidate and divide Iranian military officials. In the hours after Israel launched its first wave of strikes against Iran on June the 13th, killing top military leaders and nuclear scientists, Israeli intelligence operatives launched a covert campaign to intimidate senior officials with the apparent aim of dividing and destabilizing Tehran's theocratic regime, according to 3 people familiar with the operation. All right, so what did they do? And it says, people working for Israel security services who speak Persian, Iran's primary languages, called Iranian officials on their cell phones and warned them that they too would die unless they cease supporting the regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. According to 3 people, blah, blah. One of them estimated that more than 20 Iranians in positions of power were contacted. So they telephoned them, and they would die unless they cease supporting the regime of Khamenei. And then they're quoting, I can advise you now, you have 12 hours to escape with your wife and child. Otherwise, you're on our list right now, an Israeli intelligence operative told a senior Iranian general close to the country's rulers, according to the audio recording. So when you read that, it's clear that this is a threat against this general's wife and child. You have 12 hours to escape with your wife and child. Now, it's important to read this because we're told that Israel somehow embodies Western values. Israel shares our values, whereas the Iranians, they're all completely barbaric, horrific, they're fanatics, religious zealots. They prefer death to life, and they're ready to engage in any savagery imaginable. But who's doing the telephoning? So we have these Israelis who telephone someone and clearly threaten a general's wife and child. I can advise you now, you have 12 hours to escape with your wife and child, otherwise you're on our list right now. This Israeli intelligence operative told a senior Iranian general close to the country's rulers. This is according to the audio recording, because that recording exists. It's not something that's just simply made up. The operative then suggested that Israel could train weapons on the general and his family at any moment. Quote, "We're closer to you than your own neck vein. Put this in your head. May God protect you." So in other words, we've got our eyes on you and we can kill you. I mean, this is like something from The Sopranos, but even The Sopranos, they usually hold off on threatening somebody's child. I mean, you can kill your rival, but you don't really touch the child. Then it says the general, a member of Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, was told he had 12 hours to make a video disassociating himself from the Iranian government. So he would have 12 hours. Remember, I mean, if he does a recording within 12 hours, disassociating himself from the Iranian government, he probably is in danger of getting killed himself by the government. I mean, if you're a general, a top general, and in the middle of an armed attack by your main enemy, and then you record a video declaring your disassociation from the regime, then I think you are liable to arrest, torture, execution. I mean, these are the things that happen in war. So either way, you're either going to get killed by Israelis who say, hey, we've got our eyes on you and we can kill you anytime we want. After all, we have your telephone number. Or he does as he's told, makes a video disassociating himself from the government, and then he gets killed for doing that. So then it says, how should I send it to you? The general replies, I will send you a Telegram ID, the operative says, and they're referring to the Telegram messaging app. Send it. And then the post goes on. It's unclear whether such a video was made or sent. The general is believed to be still alive and in Iran, said one of the people familiar with the operation. But a primary goal of the operation was to deter and confuse the Tehran leadership. The phone calls to top Iranian military and security figures were one node of what Israeli security officials have described as a broad covert action campaign that complemented Israel's military assault of nuclear sites, weapons production facilities, and missile launches. The overall operation, dubbed Rising Lion by the Israeli government, relied on the activation of clandestine intelligence teams, pre-positioned weapon caches, and other capabilities that had lain dormant inside Iranian territory for weeks, even months. and that's that. It tells you what great civilized people the Israelis are. So I think it's very important just to keep this in mind, that there really is nothing admirable. Somehow, the Israelis performed this extraordinary feat, because it isn't, in principle, it isn't difficult to find the home addresses of your top generals, your top intelligence people, your nuclear scientists. I mean, it's not difficult. We can find, I'm quite sure we can find out where John Ratcliffe, the DCI, the Director of Central Intelligence, where he lives. We can find out where the Vice President. We know where the Vice President is. So there's nothing really so extraordinarily um, uh, dexterous about what Israel did. I mean, it's just that the media always want to tell us that this, Mossad, is like, they're made up of supermen. It really isn't the case. So this, this whole operation was done at the behest of Israel. It was an Israel operation. Israel has been in the business of regime change in Iran for a long time. It has sought to make use of the United States for a long time. It's all, the nuclear issue is a complete, it's a side issue. No, completely untrue. Trump got himself into this. Why he did it will remain a mystery. I guess we'll find out. We still don't know exactly why he embarked on a project that he only a few months ago had shown that he wasn't really interested in. I think, I know people say, there was a ruse, it was a ruse, but we don't know it was a ruse. The position of the Trump administration for the first few months was that we accept that Iran will be able to enrich uranium to some low level. I mean, it was under the JCPOA, it was something like 3.5%. So I was like, okay, we'll make it 3%. And then, under the influence of Netanyahu, Mark Levin and Trump reversed himself and said no nuclear enrichment whatsoever. Not 1%, 2%, 3%, nothing. And then Trump seemed to embrace the cause of regime change. This is up until Sunday, he hadn't really done that. I mean, well, last week he talked about unconditional surrender. So now he's reversed himself again, and the line now is, well, we destroyed the nuclear facilities. As far as I'm concerned, as President Trump, as far as I'm concerned, this matter is at an end, and I'm ready to work with the Iranians. And entirely to be expected, the Israel lobby has already gone into effect by declaring, as I showed in that early intelligence finding, that, hey, you didn't destroy anything. The nuclear program is intact. At most, you set it back a few months. Now, we don't know. I mean, we don't know what's true, what isn't. What we do know is how the Israel lobby, the Israel firsters, how they operate, how they molded Trump to their desires during the past couple of months, and how they're going to mold Trump to their desires in the coming days. You've already heard the hysterical spluttering from Mark Levin and the rest about the Nazis and Hitler, and they're Hitler's, they're still in Tehran. They want to they're still determined to wipe out every Jew on the face of the earth. The usual claptrap. And this is going to get worse. So Trump, who has now said that, oh well, I'm I'm happy to work with the Iranians. All I want to do is to destroy these nuclear facilities. Is going to have a hard time, and he was already he's annoyed with Netanyahu because he thought, hey, I've got the ceasefire. I worked the ceasefire. I'm this peacemaker. I'm the broker and a disinterested, neutral broker. And Netanyahu is preventing me from getting my Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, however absurd it is, but he's obviously angry. In a way, he's never been angry before because suddenly Netanyahu is in his way. Up until now, he said, "Okay, fine, we're in it together." But now that Trump has cast himself as the peacemaker, as the man who secured a ceasefire, and Netanyahu is doing, what he always does. Yeah, well, of course I'm going to violate the ceasefire. Of course I'm going to bomb Iran. Of course I'm going to take out as many Iranian government positions as possible. I mean, what do I care about a ceasefire? Well, this obviously he got himself into a thing with Trump. So we'll see what happens in the coming days. But the one thing you can say with absolute certainty is that the Israel lobby, which never sleeps, has had a setback in the last 24 hours. They were convinced after the attacks on Saturday night, after Trump's very belligerent announcement, after Trump's declaration that regime change is indeed on the cards, after that, they thought, hey, this is great. We finally got our doofus who's going to do our bidding. And then Trump reversed himself and said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm ready to put a line under it and say that's enough. But we'll see how it goes. Anyway, I have to go. I have to do a broadcast, so cutting it a little short today. But thank you very much, everybody who joined me. Thank you very much for all your comments, questions. Thank you above all to those who contributed to that tip jar, which enables the dogs to do the work that's necessary. Somebody has to do all the work, the dogs point out. So they appreciate or at least, to the extent they ever appreciate anything. They don't, they're not good at appreciation. They think they're underappreciated. But thank you for contributing. We're going to be back on Thursday, and no doubt we will talk about the NATO summit. One of these great non-events, and particularly Zelensky, who was already there and has already been shooting his mouth off. So we'll talk about NATO summit on Thursday. Thank you very much, everybody, for today. See you Thursday. All the best. Good night.